Sometimes friendship doesn't shine in the big moments. Sometimes it's found in the quiet spaces, where two men sit with nothing but a six-pack and years of unspoken history between them. Hank and Bill have shared alleys, laughter, and disappointments. But in this new season, something different happens. For the first time in a long while, Bill opens his heart and Hank awkward. Stubborn Hank has no choice but to listen. Bill Dauterive has always been the kind of man who laughs to hide the ache in his chest. To the world around him, he is the butt of jokes, the neighbor with bad luck, the friend who never quite got it together. His life, once filled with promise when he wore his army uniform with pride, slowly slipped into days of loneliness. A failed marriage, a career that never rose above routine, and nights spent wondering if anyone would truly notice if he were gone. And yet, there was always the alley. Always Hank, Dale, and Boomhauer, three men who accepted him in the only way they knew how. Hank with his short nods and simple words, Dale with his conspiracies that distracted from reality, and Boomhauer with his rambling that somehow always hit a truth Bill couldn't say out loud. For years, this was Bill's refuge, standing under the Texas sky, pen in hand, laughing along even when his laughter didn't match his eyes. But time changes things, even friendships. Hank's life pressed forward his wife Peggy with her unshakable confidence, his son Bobby growing into his own quirks. Dale kept chasing shadows only he could see. Boomhauer drifted, as he always did. And Bill stayed where he was, still in the same house, still eating alone, still waiting for a knock on the door that never came. The season begins not with loud fireworks, but with a silence that feels heavy. The kind of silence you only hear when people who have known each other for decades sit together, unsure if they should break it. Bill is the first to speak, his voice rough and small. He doesn't start with a joke this time. He doesn't cover the cracks with humor. Instead, he tells Hank about the weight he's been carrying, the fear of being forgotten, the memory of better days when he was young, when people cheered for him, when life still felt like it had a path forward. Hank shifts uncomfortably. Not because he doesn't care, but because he does. And caring for Hank Hill is dangerous. Caring means exposing himself to feelings he has spent a lifetime keeping neat and tidy, folded away like the shirts he sells at Strickland Propane. Hank has always believed in doing, not saying, fixing. A fence instead of talking about heartbreak. Handing you a beer instead of telling you that you're loved. And here is Bill, breaking that unspoken rule, pouring out the sadness he has carried for too long. The alley feels different tonight. The cicadas hum, the Texas air hangs heavy, and for once the laughter is gone. Bill doesn't look at Hank when he speaks. Maybe he's afraid of what he'll see. Maybe he's afraid Hank won't understand, but Hank listens. He doesn't turn away, he doesn't stop Bill. And in that silence, something starts to shift. Bill's words hang in the air. Longer than either of them expects. For years, he had laughed at himself before anyone else could. That was his armor. If he made the joke first, then maybe the sting wouldn't be so sharp when others piled on. But tonight, sitting on those worn patches of grass behind the alley, he lets the armor slip. His voice doesn't rise, it doesn't crack into comedy. It settles low, heavy, almost trembling. He admits the truth that's been gnawing at him. He feels invisible. The days stretch out the same, one after another, and he wonders if his absence would even cause a ripple. He confesses that sometimes he watches the families on rainy street, kids riding bikes, couples arguing about bills, laughter spilling out of kitchens, and he feels like a ghost standing on the edge of a life he was supposed to have. He tells Hank that his house feels like a museum of failures, filled with echoes of a marriage that collapsed and dreams that never took root. Hank stares down at his beer, shifting it in his hands. For a man like Hank, silence is safer than words. But even silence now feels like betrayal. He wants to say something, anything, but the sentences catch in his throat. Hank has always been a man of action. He fixes propane grills. He teaches his son right from wrong. He keeps his lawn trimmed to the inch. But when it comes to fixing a friend's breaking heart, his toolbox feels empty. Bill keeps talking, and every word seems to cost him something. He admits he envies Hank not his money or his job, but the stability, the sense of being anchored to something solid, to a wife who believes in him, to a son who loves him even when he doesn't understand him. Bill says he would give anything for that kind of life, even just a piece of it. And then, almost in a whisper, he confesses the deepest wound, that sometimes he thinks he was left behind on purpose, that his friends only keep him around out of pity. That's the moment Hank looks up. His eyes meet Bill's for the first time in their conversation, and it's clear those words cut deeper than Bill realizes. Hank has never thought of Bill as a burden, but he realizes that in all their years together, he's never said otherwise. Friendship in Hank's world is proven by showing up, by standing side by side. But maybe that isn't enough for someone like Bill, someone who needs to hear it. The night deepens. A car passes in the distance, its headlights sweeping across their faces before fading into the dark. Bill takes a shaky breath, as if speaking has both drained him and freed him. He mutters that he knows he's not much to look at, not much to rely on, but at least here in the alley he feels like he belongs. His words are raw, unpolished, the kind that don't make it into polite conversation. He's not trying to impress Hank, he's just trying not to disappear. Hank finally speaks, his voice low and awkward but steady. He doesn't deliver a grand speech because that's not who he is. Instead, he says Bill has been his neighbor, his drinking buddy, his friend for longer than most men can claim. He admits he doesn't always show it, but he wouldn't want to stand in that alley without Bill. He calls him dependable, even if Bill doesn't see it. And though the words are few, they land like an anchor, heavy and grounding. Bill blinks. Caught off guard, no one calls him dependable. No one tells him he's needed. For a moment, he doesn't know whether to laugh or cry. He does neither. He just nods, swallowing hard, letting Hank's clumsy but honest reassurance sink in. It isn't a cure, it isn't a miracle, but it's something Bill has longed for, recognition. Proof that he matters, even if it's only to this one stubborn man who's never been good with words. The cicadas buzz louder, filling the silence between them. Bill doesn't push further, and Hank doesn't retreat. They sit, side by side, in the kind of stillness that only exists between people who have seen each other at their worst and stayed anyway. For Bill, this night is different. For Hank, it's uncomfortable. But for both of them, it feels like a beginning, fragile, unspoken, yet undeniably real. The alley has never felt this heavy to Hank Hill. For years it's been a place of routine. Stand in a row. Face forward, nod occasionally. Sip beer, repeat. A man doesn't need more than that, at least not in Hank's world. But now Bill has cracked open a door. Hank has spent his whole life keeping closed. Feelings, doubts, vulnerability, things Hank avoids as carefully as he avoids propane leaks. Hank takes another slow sip of his beer, trying to collect himself. He looks out across the dark yards of Rainy Street, searching for something solid to hold on to. But all he finds is the echo of Bill's confession, that maybe his friends only keep him around out of pity. The words gnaw at Hank in a way he doesn't expect. Because while he's never said it out loud, Hank knows Bill has been the weak link in their group. He knows Bill is fragile, too easy to hurt, too easy to mock, and yet he also knows he's never once thought about walking away from him. That realization stirs something Hank doesn't like, guilt. Not because he's been cruel. Hank is many things, but cruel isn't one of them, but because he realizes silence has its own kind of cruelty. He has let Bill believe he's worthless simply by never telling him otherwise. And now, faced with Bill's bare honesty, Hank feels cornered. He's a man who fixes problems with a wrench, not with words. But what tool fixes a broken spirit? Bill sits slumped, staring at the dirt between his shoes. The sight pulls Hank back through memories he usually avoids. The nights when Bill called and no one picked up. The parties Bill was never invited to. The way even Dale, of all people, found ways to make fun of him. And Hank had stood by, silent, because what else was he supposed to do? Intervening felt messy, awkward. But now, with the weight of Bill's despair sitting right in front of him, Hank realizes how easy it is for neglect to feel like abandonment. He clears his throat. For Hank, that small sound is the signal of a battle. Every instinct tells him, to retreat, to change the subject, to pretend Bill never said a word. But there's something in Bill's eyes, tired, beaten down eyes, that won't let him. So Hank does what he can. Not a speech, not some grand gesture, but the kind of stumbling honesty that feels monumental because it's so rare coming from him. "You're wrong about one thing, Bill," Hank finally mutters. "We don't keep you around out of pity. You're here because you've always been here, because you're one of us." The words come out awkward, blunt, but Bill's head jerks up as if Hank has just handed him a lifeline. Hank's face burns with discomfort. He hates this. Hates how exposed it makes him feel, but he doesn't stop. He tells Bill that he's loyal in ways most men aren't, that he shows up even when life keeps knocking him down. Hank admits that half the time they all take him for granted. And, then, quieter, he adds that the alley wouldn't feel right without him. Bill swallows hard. His lip trembles, but for once he doesn't collapse into self-pity. He just nods, holding Hank's gaze like a man who's been starved for affirmation and finally caught a taste of it. And for a moment, Hank sees the soldier in him again, the man who once stood proud in uniform, not just the broken figure left behind. But Hank isn't comfortable in this space for long. His words hang there, and he shifts in his seat, embarrassed by his own sincerity. He covers it the only way he knows how, by reaching into the cooler, pulling out another beer, and handing it to Bill without another word. In Hank's language, that gesture says everything. The silence that follows isn't heavy anymore. It's steady, calm, almost healing. The cicadas still sing, but now the night feels different, less like a weight pressing down, more like a blanket wrapping around them. For the first time in years, Bill feels seen. And for the first time, Hank realizes that his presence, his stubborn reliability, can mean more than any polished speech. Yet beneath the surface, Hank is unsettled. Because if Bill can bare his soul like this, what does it say about Hank himself? How many things has he buried so deep that even his closest friends don't know they exist? That question lingers in Hank's mind as he sits there, staring at the stars over Arlen, pretending he's just another man drinking another beer. But inside, a door has opened. And once a door like that opens, it's not so easy to shut again. A breeze moves through the alley like a slow breath, and the night seems to loosen its grip. Hank feels the ground under his boots, steady and cool, and he decides to do the thing he hates most. He talks about himself. He says he is not good at this. He says he worries that if he starts, the words will come out wrong and make things worse. He admits he has spent years hiding behind chores and rules because rules are simple and people are not. His voice is flat. A little stiff, but honest in a way Bill has not heard before. He tells Bill there were days he wanted to knock on his door and did not, because he did not know what to say. He says he told himself that a man needs space, but now he thinks maybe that was an excuse. He looks at the can in his hand as if it might answer for him, then says the word he almost never says: sorry. It lands between them like a small tool placed on a workbench, plain and useful. Bill listens with his head bent, as if each sentence is rain on dry ground. He does not rush in with jokes. He does not wave it off. He lets Hank speak, and in that space Hank finds more to give. He talks about fear. Not the loud kind, but the quiet fear that he will fail as a friend the way men fail when they look away. He says he kept thinking there would be a better time. He says there is no better time than this. The alley light flickers, and for once, Hank lets the flicker stand. He turns a little toward Bill and makes a plan the way he makes a shopping list. Saturday breakfast, noon check-in on Sundays. If Bill's sink still leaks, they fix it tomorrow. If the porch bulb keeps blowing, they change the socket. If the grass gets too high, Hank will bring the mower. He says it simply, like he is listing parts for a grill, not pieces of a man's hope. Bill nods. His hands shake, then settle. Routine. Sounds like shelter, but Hank is not done. He says they should build something. A small thing so it gets done. A bench for the alley, out of scrap cedar if they can find it. A place to sit that will not sink into the dirt. They will set it level, bolt it clean, seal it against the weather. Bill's eyes lift. He can see it, two men bent over wood, the Smell of sawdust and the dry thump of a mallet. He smiles, and it is not the smile he uses to hide. It is quiet and real. Bill reaches in his pocket and pulls out an old unit patch, frayed at the edges. He says he kept it because it reminds him that he used to belong to something bigger than himself. He presses it into Hank's palm. "Keep it," he says, "just for a while. It is a trust more than a gift." Hank looks at the patch like it is a live wire and nods, slow and careful. He answers with his own small offering, a spare key to his truck, the one he keeps in his wallet in case of trouble. "If you ever need it, you use it," he says. No questions. The night thins. A dog barks once and goes quiet. Somewhere a screen door taps shut. Bill breathes easier, and the lines on his face seem less deep. He tells Hank he was scared he had already said too much. Hank tells him he has said exactly what he needed to. He says when a thing is weak, you do not throw it out, you brace it, you find the studs. You add a beam. Bill laughs at that soft, grateful, and for the first time the laugh fits the man. They talk about small things then, work, weather, the price of a good hose. But the talk sits on top of something solid now. Hank finds himself saying he is proud of Bill for showing up, not just here, but in life. He says most people would have gone quiet and stayed quiet. Bill looks away at that because praise feels like bright light. He takes it anyway. A stillness comes that is not empty. It is full, like a room after a hard day's work. Hank stands and tests his knees, then reaches for Bill. The handshake turns into a short, awkward pull, and then they both step back, both of them pretending it was nothing and both of them knowing it was not. Hank clears his throat and says he will bring the saw tomorrow. Bill says he will find the screws and oil the hinges on the gate. They gather their cans, not out of habit, but out of care, and the alley looks better for it. When they turn to leave, Hank says one more thing. If the nights get bad, do not wait for Saturday, he says. Knock. Bill says he will. He means it. He feels it like a new rule inside him, one he wants to keep. At Bill's fence, they pause. The air smells like dust and cut grass, and a thin line of dawn sits low on the edge of the street. Bill thanks Hank, but the word is too small. Hank tells him thanks back, which makes even less sense and yet somehow fits. They part with no big speech. No grand promise. They do not need one. The bench will be proof. The routine will be proof. The next knock will be proof. When Hank reaches his yard, he turns the patch over in his hand and tucks it into his pocket like a sacred thing. Bill touches the place where the patch used to sit in his wallet and feels lighter, as if the weight has shifted from a private ache to a shared load. The alley holds their steps, keeps their plan, and waits for the sound of a saw. And when the saw comes, it will be loud and it will be good.